Good afternoon. Welcome to the Intune MAM session, or the Intune App Protection session. We've got this long session title here, but this is actually the Intune MAM session. So my name is...
This isn't our name. We didn't come up with this. So.
Not our fault. Take that into account when you're filling out your evals. So my name's Matt Shadbolt. I am a Senior Program Manager for the Intune team, and this is my good friend Neil. Say hi, Neil.
Hi, Neil.
We work for the Intune product group. Neil works on the CAT team, so he's working with you guys every day deploying Intune, and I work for the feature team. Own a bunch of security-related features, including MAM for iOS and Android, and also Windows. Today is solely based on iOS and Android. There's a dedicated session for Windows information protection tomorrow morning, run by Derek Adam. Highly suggest you go and check that out. This is just dedicated in iOS and Android this morning. We actually presented this about 2 hours ago to another group, and it took about an hour and 15 minutes to get through 45 minutes of content. So we're going to be pushing it for time today, so we might just jump in. Apologies if we're flying through some of the stuff. We probably won't have time for questions, but we can hang around, and we'll be on the booth afterwards as well. So enough waffling. In terms of an agenda today, we're going to first start off with an introduction to Intune App Protection. We'll have 2 or 3 fluffy slides, a really basic demo, and then we'll get into some of the more technical content. Neil here is going to talk about Exchange on-prem and APP, including conditional access, how to get all that working, and a couple of demos there. We'll talk about troubleshooting APP. So this is a level 300 session. We want to give you guys some good technical content, so we'll talk about troubleshooting, some demos with that as well. And then we'll go across 4 of the newer features within Intune that we've shipped in the last 12 months. And unlikely, if we have some time at the end, we'll do some Q&A. So 3 waffly slides. The first thing I want to show you is the traditional approach to device management and protecting corporate data. So you all know about MDM, right? Everybody's enrolling their devices. My organization basically becomes the owner of the device. I can do my full wipes, I can push applications, I can see things like telephone numbers of mobile devices and things like that. And generally, your users aren't super happy about that. We get that feedback all the time that we don't want to take full control of my device just to access my corporate email. I just want to be able to do my work without having to I suppose, give over all the control of my personal devices. So a couple of years ago, we came up with the concept of Intune App Protection, or formerly MAM. And what MAM does is it extracts that management and that control away from the MDM side, away from the whole device management, and puts it into the application. So we build a bunch of SDKs that we partnered with all of our, well, the vast majority of our first-party applications, like Outlook and Word and Excel, who have partnered with us to incorporate our SDK, and that enables us and you guys to be able to manage the data in those applications without having to do a full MDM enrollment. The great thing about this is for our end users, being a BYO device or any device, all they need to do is use the applications that they like to use. So they like to use Outlook and they like to use Word, and if they sign in with their corporate credentials, we're going to just seamlessly protect that application and the data within it. So there's no enrollment process, there's no registration process, we're just going to protect it. So the experience is awesome for your end users. And again, they get to use those apps that they really like to use, like Teams and Outlook and so forth. But there's also a scenario where we want to use both as well. So MAM and MDM don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. We can do both. So in the situation where you've got MDM corporate-owned devices, we can still run through DEP enrollments or corporate MDM enrollments, but also layer MAM on top of that as well. So provide the app layer protection with MAM and do the device management with MDM as well. Second waffly slide. So when we think about app protection and management, we consider this timeline. So we're generally going to add an application. They're going to be, again, all the first-party applications that your users love, but also some of the third-party applications like Adobe Reader and so forth. We're going to deploy those applications via Intune in a whole bunch of different ways. Obviously, we have required versus available applications for enrolled devices, but many people don't know that we have the ability to push some of these applications out to unenrolled devices as well. And I'll show a little demo about that a little bit later as well. Once we're deploying those applications, a lot of those applications require us to do some sort of configuration. So I want to push down a server address or a VPN port or something like that. And we have two ways to do that today. The first way is doing it with enrollment, so pushing down app config settings via MDM, just as a lot of our competing vendors do. But we also can do that without enrollment as well. So if we've got configuration settings that we want to push down to a device or an application that isn't enrolled, we can do that via Intune MAM as well. And then we come into the protection side, and this is really where a lot of the value that our customers see with the Intune app protections come. So this is doing things like blocking cut, copy, and paste, or blocking save as. One of the most popular features is just to block local storage of corporate files. So enforce your users to be able to save those Word docs and those files they're getting off SharePoint sites just to OneDrive for Business or just to SharePoint. I can't move it across the box. I can't move it across to Google Drive. They've got to stay in my corporate locations. At the end of the life cycle is a retire. Everybody knows MDM retire. They've all seen the demo, doing full wipes when their device has been lost. But we can also do that for the unenrolled devices as well. So if I've got my lob apps, for example, one of my line of business apps that's protected by APP, on a device that isn't necessarily MDM enrolled, we can do a selective wipe on that as well, just to pull that corporate data off of that end user's device. So this is the life cycle that we see: add, deploy, configure, protect, and then retire. And this really applies to any of your applications as well. So any of our first-party applications, but if you have your internal lob apps, we can do exactly the same protection controls as we can for your Outlook and so forth, and provide that same experience for your end users as well. And just briefly on that, just one slide on the app wrapping tools and so forth. For those lob applications, it's super simple for you guys to add things like jailbreak detection and so forth. We've got three options here to be able to incorporate our app protection policies into your applications. The first one is using our app wrapping tool, which is the most simple way to do this. It's a command line tool. You grab your IPAs and APKs, you feed it into the command line, and then we spit out an application that's MAM ready. I can then add it to the console, deploy down the same settings that I'm doing for Outlook, and your users are going to be protected for those applications. The other two ways are for more mature development-led organizations. So an organization who may want to put their apps in the store and protect them with Intune App Protection might want to incorporate the SDK or use the Xamarin plugins to do that. So 3 waffly slides in 6 minutes. All right, let me switch across to a demo now. I just really want to show a couple of brief demos, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so for the people who haven't seen this is the device management portal, which one of this guy over here told me to use instead of using portal.azure.com. And what I'm going to do is come into client apps. All I'm going to show you in this really, really brief demo is just how easy it is to create an APP policy and assign it to our Outlook application. If I come into app protection policies, I'm going to just create a new policy by clicking add a policy. And then I'm going to fill in some basic information. So give it a name. I've got a platform. Again, I can choose iOS or Android. If I select Windows, I then come into the Windows Information Protection configuration. But for this one, I'm just going to do an iOS APP policy for Outlook. So when I select apps here, I get a full list of all the apps that we support today, first party and third party. So you can see, for example, PowerPoint. We should be able to see Adobe Reader for Intune, but the one that I care about for this demo is my Outlook application. If I select that and then go to settings, I can see all the DLP controls that I mentioned earlier. Every month we seem to be adding 1 or 2 of these DLP controls, so the list is getting longer and longer. But I just want to show you this quick one, which is prevent save as. So all I'm going to do here is say OneDrive for Business and SharePoint are the only 2 locations that I can save my corporate documents to if I receive an email in my corporate account. So if my a partner organization sends me something from Gmail, that's a Word doc that lands into my corporate inbox, and I try and open it, I try and save it as to Box or G Drive or wherever it's going to be, the only options for them will be to save it to OneDrive. So if I click OK here and create, I've now got a policy. To activate that policy, all I need to do is assign it to my users, and then now seamlessly all my users are going to be protected for Outlook. So any of your users that are using Outlook today that have signed in with their corporate account will now have APP protection applied to them. They don't need to enroll their device. They don't need to do anything extra other than just use the application and they'll be automatically protected. So really within 5 to 10 minutes, you guys should be, if you're Exchange Online or on-prem, which Neil's going to cover a little bit later, if you're using Exchange, within 5 or 10 minutes, you can enable this very quickly and very seamlessly. So I just want to switch over to 6 and show you guys another demo of installing an application without enrollment. Here we go. So I'm on this device, there's no MDM management on it, but I've got a lob app that I want to make available to my end users. And we want them to be able to use this application, but we also want to protect it as well. So I've used the app wrapping tool, I've fed it into the command line and spat out a protected application. If I come into, it's already loaded for me. If I come into Safari and just go to portal.manage.microsoft.com, what I'm going to do is log in with my user Paul. And what I'm going to see here is an application that's available to me called EMS at Ignite. If I click on the EMS at Ignite, this application's been made available to me with or without enrollment, which means I can install it on an unmanaged device. So if I click Install, I'm going to get a pop confirming I want to do that. I'm going to click Install. If I go home, you can see that the application's installing. There's no MDM in play here at all. This is all happening via Intune without enrollment. And now because that application's been wrapped, we have all that same control of setting jailbreak policies, doing remote wipes, and all of those great things that we can do with Outlook as well. So within 5 minutes, we've deployed the lob app, we've protected Outlook, and our users haven't had to run through any sort of enrollment process. So with that, Neil?
Thank you very much, mate.
5.
Cool, thank you. Okay, Matt hates it when I do this, but can I get a show of hands? How many people out there still have Exchange on premises?
Wow.
Yeah, so loads.
What are you guys doing?
Yeah. You should fix that. So we hear the message, right? So many of our customers there's a whole load of reasons why that's required. There's a whole bunch of constraints and geographic reasons and sovereignty issues why those mailboxes need to be kept on premises. We think that's going to be around for a little while. And there are some issues when you're looking at the EMS capabilities and those Exchange on-premises mailboxes, right? So we can do a whole bunch of really cool stuff if they're in Exchange online, but some real basic stuff breaks when we're on premises, and things like Outlook don't work that well. Well, we're going to change that a little bit. So this is the old world. Exchange was basic auth. We couldn't really use any of our APP policies because APP needs an Azure Active Directory token to identify the end user. And Exchange doesn't give us one of those, so we were unable to do that. And that didn't just break APP, it broke a whole bunch of things for us. So it meant that Outlook, if you connected Outlook into your Exchange on-premises environment, not only could we not protect it via APP, we also couldn't apply conditional access policies because the device ID that is critical to conditional access, the way Outlook works in its architecture, it obfuscates the device ID from the actual device. So it reuses the very first connection that goes in, and that gave us some problems. So frankly, what we used to do was say, don't use Outlook on premises. Right? So that was probably the case that most of you are in, using native mail clients for on-premises, and then when those mailboxes get migrated into Exchange Online, if they get moved across, then you can switch Outlook on and make use of them. And that's a jarring experience for the end user, and it's a real pain for migration projects because you've got different sets of users and different sets of scenarios. Well, we've changed that. So our colleagues, my ex-colleagues over in the Exchange engineering team, have switched on something called Exchange Hybrid Modern Auth. Microsoft are the best organization at naming features, and this remains one of my favorites. Basically what this means is hybrid, with OAuth, right? So it's enabling modern auth for on-premises Exchange. And that lights up a whole bunch of it. It's a simple change. It's a simple thing for us to enable. But once we've done that, it lights up all of the EMS stack. So conditional access and APP policies all will work seamlessly whether you're on premises or whether you're in the cloud. This is what that architecture looks like. So essentially the client connecting into Office 365. So Outlook connects into Office 365. And then Office 365, the Exchange Online components go and fetch the bits of email that you need from your on-premises Exchange server. So, sorry, is that that's bizarre?
Is that feedback?
I don't know. Yeah, so what happens there essentially is that all of your Exchange infrastructure remains exactly as it is today. You do need to publish ActiveSync. But then your Outlook clients essentially connect into Exchange Online, and then there's a subset of data that's synchronized and cached into Exchange Online. So with that, I'm going to do a quick demo. So I think this is 6. Cool, right. So what I have here is an unmanaged iPad. It's not an MDM enrolled iPad, it's unmanaged. And what I'm going to do is go through the Outlook experience of connecting into an on-premises mailbox, right? And then we're going to look at the APP policies that are applied, the protections, and we're also going to look at app config as well for this user. So I can't type and talk at the same time, so just have to bear with me while I try and not spell anything wrong.
Typing in front of a crowd is about as bad as it gets.
This should be part of the recruitment process. I think this is how you sort out. Yeah, it's horrific. Your brain wants it's on steroids. So I'm going to do this. You can see it's hit my ADFS server down here. I'm also going to demo the best feature in iOS 12, which is LastPass integration. Yay! Cool. So I've not been asked for anything, but did you notice that I've not really been asked for a great deal? I've just been asked for my credentials. It's not asking me for servers. It's not asking me for anything else. And yet here I am, and I've got my mailbox, and boom, it's hit me with an APP policy immediately. And I'm on premises, remember, and I'm unmanaged, right? So it's going to close me down. I'm going to start up Outlook again. It's going to ask me for a PIN. I'm going to go with 1234 because that's my favorite PIN. And so you'll notice a few things here. So if I go and take a look in the settings for this user, you'll notice here it says Exchange Hybrid underneath. That's the bit that tells you it's an Exchange on premises. If it's an Office 365 mailbox, it will tell you it's Office 365. But from an end user perspective, it's the same experience, right? They don't really notice any difference. So with that, I'm going to go and do the most used demo in the world ever and just show you copy and paste being blocked for this user. But I've still got it in here, actually. You can't tell we just did this demo before, can you? So it's the classic demo, but this is your on-premises data, right? This is not in Exchange Online. This is in your data center. Exchange 2013 or 2016, and we're able to protect that data. But we can do more than that. Even though this is an unmanaged device, we can use app config via the APP channel. So this is an unmanaged device. We're configuring Outlook via APP. And what I'm going to do here, and what I'm going to take a look at, have a look in my contacts. I've got my standard contact card, which iCloud has put down for me. But I can go in here and I can switch on contact sync. So if I go in here and take a look in Charlie, and I'm going to select Save Contact. So I've got one contact, and I can then say Save to my iPad. So while that's happening, I'm going to go and take a look at the contacts I've got in here. So I've got Kate in here. And you can see I have added some information, some more rich information about Kate. So I've got Kate's IM address, I've got her home address where she lives, and I've put a bunch of notes in there about Kate for me. So for some of our customers, this is really rich information. This information will be stuff about, the kind of sales focus, or there may be sensitive information in here about the user that you don't want to share. But I've just saved that to my local contacts database in iOS. Now, what that means is I've lost APP controls over that user. Okay, that contact that I've just saved, while it's stored in Outlook, I've got APP controls, and I'm blocking copy and paste, and I've got some controls over there. But if somebody calls me, then the caller ID is not going to work, right? Because that data is stored in Outlook and not in the context database. So, given the data that I've got, and if I have a look in here, there's a whole bunch of stuff missing from the contact. So what I've done via app config is I've restricted the fields that I'm going to sync into the local context DB. And you can see here, literally all I've put in there is Kate's name and her phone number. So caller ID will work. If Kate calls me, caller ID is going to work great, and I can see it's Kate coming. However, if somebody was to get hold of this device, I could wipe the MAM data from Outlook, and even if the context DB remained on the device, I've not lost all of those sensitive notes data and her home address and those kinds of things. I've only got those kinds of things in there. Cool. So thank you. Is that going to be useful for anybody, the on-prem stuff?
We got an applause.
Boom. These are the dependencies to make it work. The big one, we went through this in the previous session. The big one is just no Exchange 2010, right? So if you've got Exchange 2010 in your organization, get rid. If you don't have Exchange 2010 in your organization, go and switch this on. It's relatively straightforward to do, and Outlook and APP and those things will just start to work for you. Conditional access, multi-factor auth, all of that stuff for your on-premises users. So cool.
Cool. Okay. So troubleshooting. Let's dig a little bit deeper into this stuff. I've got a few slides and a couple of demos. So this slide is around our APP requirements. So if something's not working, we need to understand why and understand what we should be doing to set stuff up in the first place. So the first one is a question that we get all the time is why on Android do I need the company portal for MAM to work, and why on iOS do I not need to have that? And the reason is there's significant differences in terms of the platform limitation. So iOS sandboxing just doesn't allow us to be able to use a company portal to pull down MAM policies for us. So what iOS does is it calls into our MAM service directly and pulls down the policies into the app and provides protection that way. So the user experience for iOS is great because they don't need to install the company portal app, but there is one downside to that architecture, and that is all of those applications are incorporating the SDK individually. So when we ship new features or bug fixes and so forth, each one of our partner applications needs to update their SDK into their applications. So the user experience is better than Android, but they might not be getting some of these newer features as fast as their Android counterparts. Android, on the other hand, may have a slightly worse user experience because they need the company portal app installed on the device. All they need to do is launch the app once. They don't need to sign in or anything. Once that company portal app's on there, the MAM-enabled applications actually proxy via the company portal app to receive policies. So the user experience isn't as good as iOS, but because we own the company portal app, we can ship features and bug fixes much faster. So that's a question that I get all the time. The second question I get all the time is why is the Authenticator app required for iOS when you're doing conditional access? So conditional access for Outlook will block access to mail unless you're using either a registered device or an approved application being Outlook. The way Azure Active Directory works is we rely on the way conditional access works is we rely on Azure Active Directory itself. So there's got to be some sort of device record in Azure AD for us to be able to pass conditional access compliance. So for iOS, to do that device registration, we use the Authenticator app. So you'll get prompted to install the Authenticator app, you do a device registration, and then from that point on, you're registered and you should be able to pass as compliance. For Android, though, we don't have that requirement because we actually built that code into the company portal app. So if you've got MAM, you need the company portal app on there, then we'll do the device registration for Android as well. So it's actually a little bit better of an experience for Android, even though you have to have the company portal app installed. Some other interesting points is the identity must be the same across all managed apps. It kind of makes sense. We are doing some investigations around some scenarios where we'll have multi-users in there, but there's no timeline for that work at the moment. The application for your lob apps must authenticate end users via ADL, so that's another process that you're going to need to do when you're doing your lob app work. And I suppose one right at the bottom here, which is an important one to note, is all our MAM policies and APP policies and all this stuff requires an Intune license. That sounds like really dumb and like straightforward, right? But we get so many support calls where man policies aren't applying because somebody hasn't licensed the Intune user. So get your licenses in early. Next, I want to talk about first app check-in and the process of what actually goes on when you launch that application. So this is similar for Android, but I'm targeting this at iOS. Oh, some lights. I can see you guys.
Yeah, wake up now.
Yeah, like it's cold enough, everybody's still awake.
Yeah.
So I've got an application here installed on my device. It's a lob application. It's one of my line of business applications. It's HR application or something like that, something that I need out in my field. This again is an unmanaged device. I'm just bringing my own device and wanting to use that. And my organization is an Intune organization, so I've wrapped that application with the wrapping tool. So there's now a man policy applied to this application. And when the user first launches the application, the first thing we're going to need to do is ask for their credentials. So when we click next, we're going to get user authentication. So this is a very similar process to what you'd see in Outlook or Word and so forth. They put in their Azure AD credentials. And what happens then is we have enough credentials to be able to check into the Intune service. So we have something that we call the location services. And what the application does is it pings a location service and finds out where my user is in terms of all the scale units we have around the world. So if I'm a North America user, I'm going to go to North America Intune scale units. So once I've found my account location, I'm going to request a registration into the Intune app service. So the Intune SDK is going to register the user plus the app, and then it's going to return an Intune app protection token. And this token is then used from that point on in terms of syncing for policy and so forth. Oh, dark again. The Intune SDK then queries for policy using the APP token, and the policy is going to be delivered down to my application. And you'll see here a couple of key value pairs here. So these are just 3 examples. I've got contact sync disabled. This is the format that we deliver these policy settings down to the application themselves. I've got contact sync disabled. I've got clipboard sharing level equals 3. And I've got device compliance enabled. Now, Neil's going to show us how we can understand these a little bit easier later in the session. But these 3 settings mean we're going to disable contact sync. We're going to allow any app to be able to share their clipboard. And we're also going to require a non-jailbroken device. And these settings are then going to be picked up by the SDK, and they're going to be interpreted, and the features that you would expect are going to be blocked and controlled. So once we've done first check-in, we need to do policy refreshes. And this is another I suppose, question that I get all the time is how often do these applications check in for policy changes? So by default, and there's something that you can't change, there's a 30-minute threshold for check-ins. And what happens is these applications run in a timer, and every 30 minutes the application is going to go and check in. There's a caveat to that the application needs to be in the foreground. So Outlook needs to be running for the application to check in. If it's sitting in the background, if it's sleeping, if it's not active, the application won't be checking in the background. But if that 30-minute timer expires while the application's in the background, as soon as you bring that to the foreground, the application will check in straight away. So there should be no delay in that check-in there. 2 important points though. If there's no policy assigned to a user, the check-in will only occur every 8 hours. So if you've got a brand new user who you've just targeted a policy at and they're already using Outlook, it's already being used, they're already signed in with their corporate credentials, it can take up to 8 hours for that policy to apply. So you want to get these policies assigned to your users as soon as possible. And it's very similar for the Intune license, but it's actually 24 hours. So if the Outlook application is being used by a user and it doesn't have an Intune license, it's not going to check in 30 minutes or 8 hours, it's going to check in every 24 hours. And the reason for that is that there's a lot more users using Outlook that don't use Intune. So we don't want to be checking in every 30 minutes for policy changes for users who aren't Intune licensed. So if you don't have a license applied to your user, there could be an up to 24-hour delay for those applications to check in. The way to force this is just to log out and then log back in. So if you're doing your testing, log out, sign out of the application, sign back in, and then the policy check in and everything will work straight away. So Neil's going to jump up and do some demos and some troubleshooting stuff. He's going to show the troubleshooting portal and about Intune help as well. But I suggest you're having a look at the APP report as well. There's some reports around user check-ins, so you'll be able to see the last sync time, which you can then use to correlate, on the device in terms of when it's actually checked in, when policy is signed, and so forth. The APP report's really, really helpful. And on logging, we've streamlined the logging process now as well. So rather than having to collect logs and send them to CSS, Microsoft CSS, and your help desk guys, we actually automatically bundle up those logs and send them up to Microsoft CSS for you now as well. So we've significantly improved that process as well. Neil, demo?
Thank you very much, mate. I will.
And 6.
We sound like a kind of first grade maths teachers, don't we? 5, 6, 7. We got the wrong one.
Yep. 7.
We're going to move on to 8 later. It's going to be great. You guys are going to love it. Crikey.
Oh, Teams is pinging you.
Yeah, where's Teams coming in? There we go. Teams can go. Right. So this is the device management portal, which apparently we should use. And so we are. And in here, at the bottom of here on the left-hand side, you'll see the troubleshooting blade down here, right at the bottom. So if you just hit up devicemanagement.microsoft.com, at the bottom of there, you'll see troubleshoot. Now, we added this quite a while ago, but we're still seeing this out working with customers where this is not the first place people are going to, and it absolutely should be. So if things are not behaving pretty much anywhere in Intune, so if you're doing something and the behavior you're experiencing is not what you think you should be experiencing, dive in here and it will provide you a ton of information and try and help. So the first thing it wants us to know is the user. So I'm going to go and pick my on-premises user, Charlie. See, I still can't talk and type, but. So here we go. It's going to go and find some information about Charlie for us. Now you can see here the very first thing front and center as it's telling us Intune license is green. So great stuff, right? We've got a license for our user, so we know that Intune should be working and should be behaving itself for us. We can see a bunch of other bits and pieces here. So the client apps that are being pushed down. We can see app protection status. We can see here devices. It's telling us no registered devices, so no smoke and mirrors earlier. It wasn't an MDM managed device. They're not in there. We can also take a look at the policies. So we can go and have a look at app protection policies. And you can see here that I've got one app protection policy. It's for all of the apps, and it's being targeted at Charlie. So we should be seeing him there. So we can also look down here into our app protection status. And if we hit See All, what it's going to do is pull back all of the check-ins that as Matt was talking about when we do the check-in into the MAM service. We send a bit of information. Now, if we have a look here, you'll see at the top, checked in, Outlook, today's date, 1:03 p.m. That was Charlie connecting Outlook into the MAM service. So don't forget, unmanaged device, that's the application itself checking into the MAM service. So I don't really need to see the device, right? Just looking at this, I can kind of see, and I'm pretty confident that, hey, Charlie's licensed, I know he's using Outlook, and I'm pretty confident he's got that policy, right? But what if he hasn't? What if the behavior we're seeing on Charlie's device doesn't quite match what we want to see? So we need to go and take a look at the device in that case. So are we going to go with 6? We're going to work up to 8 later. We are going to get there. It's going to be great. So here on the end user device itself, one of the bits of feedback that we had from many of our customers it would be great if we could see exactly what was being delivered to the device. So obviously we can see the behavior of the client itself, but what if it's not doing what we think? So for example, what if we've got a pin set and we're not being prompted for a pin, or some of the controls are not working the way we expect? So we can go into Edge or the managed browser. And if we go into the bar here, we can type about, just honestly, Apple. Is anyone else doing that, hitting the emoticon? Honestly, I'm very angry about that.
Angry Englishman.
I know, that's the last thing you need, right? That's. So I can go in here and I can hit in Intune Help, and I get given this screen. So it gives me a bunch of information. But the thing we want is the View Intune App Status at the bottom. I get this rotational UI at the top, so I can go and pick the app that I'm interested in. So I'm going to pick Outlook. And this is the JSON policy that has actually been processed and delivered to the app itself. So let's say you've got multiple policies being applied to the app. This is what's actually going to happen. So we can see here, these are all of the different commands that have been put in that policy. Now, some of this makes sense. So it makes sense if you work with APP a lot. Some of it might not. So to help with deciphering this, Matt has created, what am I doing? So I can hit done and get out of that. One of the things that Matt has created, I can dive in here, and I'm not going to press the emoticon button. So aka.ms/Intune help. What this will do is we'll drop you into the policy definition where it tells us what those things mean. So if you see these various numbers, so app sharing format 1, that means managed apps only. So you can sort of decipher exactly what that policy and what those values mean with this table and help you figure that stuff out. So what we generally recommend, first port of call, the troubleshooting blade in the Intune policy UI. The second step is the console, the Intune help console in Edge. Cool.
Awesome.
To you, Matt.
Is that helpful? Yeah. How many people didn't know about Intune help? Yeah.
Nice.
Well,
we're adding value, mate. We are adding value.
It doesn't work on Android. It works on iOS.
Yeah.
Great feedback.
Oh, we're just crashing down.
Yeah.
We're crashing down. We were on a roll
So
then.
the same stuff is in the Android logs though, right? So if you go and do a log collection, there's part of the policy body that will give you exactly the same policy body there. I've got an example on here I can show you later. It's exactly the same JSON policy. We just don't have that fancy UI to be able to access it. But Android guys like logs anyway, right? So. Okay, with 7 minutes and 50 seconds to go, we're going to talk about some new features. So the first two I was going to present. I won't show for the console for the second one because we're just running out of time, and Neil's got some cool stuff to show. So 4 new features that we wanted to discuss. 3 of them have been shipping for like the last 12 months, but a lot of people don't seem to know about them. And a lot of customer conversations that I've had this week is like, yeah, we'd love to do this, and we're like, well, we can already do that. So the first one. Is Edge browser, and I'm not going to harp on Edge browser for too long because there's an entire dedicated session directly after this one with Jamie from my team, who's going to be taking you through the Edge browser implementation. I suppose the key takeaway is that we have Edge support now for MAM and APP policies. So we all know that the Intune managed browser isn't your end user's favorite apps. And when you're restricting their corporate sites to the managed browser, there can be some complaints. So the great thing is that we have Edge support for all the same controls that you've seen here. You saw the Intune help being available for it. So the Edge browser is awesome. So I'm sure your end users will be really happy if you can standardize on that. Hang around for Jamie's session, and you can answer all of your questions. The next thing I wanted to raise was the protocol exceptions for data transfer. So this is another one that, talking with some customers yesterday, they weren't aware of this. So this is a scenario whereby we've got applications that aren't necessarily Intune app protection enabled, and we want to allow the data transfer to go to those applications. The scenario that I always use is the WebEx scenario. So we've got a partner organization who are constantly inviting us to WebEx conference calls rather than Skype conference calls. And if I get it on my protected device that doesn't allow data transfer, I click on the link, I get, hey, you can't go here because your organization's blocked it. So what we shipped probably about 9 months ago is what we call the protocol exceptions. What you can see here is for iOS, for example, the tel, tel:// is a protocol handler for the telephone. So when links come through for Outlook that are telephone numbers, you can click on this. It's actually going to run this tel. With the telephone number, it's going to launch in the phone app, right? So the feature that we shipped was for the ability for you guys to define these protocol handlers in the policy yourselves. So for WebEx, for example, we just type WBX in our policy, and now all our WebEx links are going to allow us to automatically launch across into the WebEx app. The way this works is the user is going to click on the link, it's going to bring us across to Edge or managed browser, and then it's going to pop across and we're going to be able to join that call seamlessly. For iOS, it uses protocol handlers like tel and Skype and Maps. So Maps is another great one. If you were receiving addresses and so forth via email, we want to click those and bring you to the Maps application. For Android examples, we need to actually use the bundle ID. So for phone, for example, com.android.phone is, and some of these are enabled by default for you when you enable the feature. So that's the exceptions for protocol, the protocol exceptions for data transfer. I think, Neil, you've got the last two to talk about.
Cool, thanks, mate. I am going, in the efficiencies of time, I am going to just hit straight into our UI. And I'm just going to show them in the UI, so some of the features that we've got. So one of the big ones, when we create our policies, if you notice now, when you create an APP policy, you'll see this target to all app types. If I select no, it gives me this drop down and I can choose to have the application policy targeted to managed or unmanaged devices or unmanaged apps. Now, the really cool thing about this is it means that we can have a different experience for the same user depending on whether their device is enrolled. Let's say it's a corporate DEP device that's going to come straight into the MDM platform and we're going to manage that device and own it entirely, or whether it's their personal device. Right, so it may be their personal iOS device. Previously, we would only have one policy and we would have to do really crazy things with groups and things to get this behavior. But now it's the same policy and we can do the same stuff with the same targeting, and we can have different behaviors depending on the state of that device. So that's really, really cool. But also, we shipped a whole bunch of other stuff in the policy. A whole bunch of other stuff in the policy. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom down here and highlight a few of the other things that we've got. So if you look down here where it says max pin attempts, we can set the value, but we can also set the behavior, right? So we can say, if you miss your pin, so if you get the pin wrong a few times, what do we do? Do we prompt you to reset your pin, or do we just wipe the data, okay? Previously, we were just a bit draconian in this case, and for many of these settings, it would be black and white, right? We would either let you do whatever it was you wanted to do, or we would block you and cause a problem. So we've done some changes here. There's some other changes as well, if you notice. So the MinOS version, previously we just had block or allow. So we would either allow you or we would block you. And now we've got in some of the capabilities of warn. We can block access or we can wipe the data. So if we have older devices, so on iOS it's not so prevalent, but certainly on Android, some of the older Android devices, you may choose, hey, look, I really don't want my corporate data on these older Android builds, so just wipe it. Whereas let's say you just want to encourage those users to upgrade a little bit, you could put in a warn instead. We can do others as well. So there's things like device model. So we can go in here. On Android, we can do device manufacturer as well. So you can control which devices, which models you want to allow your data to be running on. If the user is using one of those devices, that's great. If they're not, let's say they're using a, I don't know, Samsung device or whatever, then you may choose to allow that on the Android side, and that's cool. If they're using, they've been on holiday and they've found some kind of cheap device from an airport in India somewhere and they've brought this thing back, you may not be so keen to allow your corporate data on that device, and you can block that in the unmanaged scenario and managed as well. So with that, I think
we did it. A minute to go.
1 minute to go. Q&A. 1 minute Q&A. That's where, boom.
Yeah. So all the content that we just raced through there are in the slides, and they'll be available online, I'm assuming, as well. So there's some caveats around some of those features and things that you need to set up to get it all working. They're all in the deck. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, guys. And we'll be on the Intune booth if you need to talk to us. So.